冒険の反対語は、対義語は何だと思いますかって言われて、
はい、
母親です。男の子は母親を離れてから冒険に出るんです。僕は冒険物語を書きたいので、母親は出てきませんって言われて。
Mothers are the opposite of adventure. Whenever Oda-sensei is asked about Luffy's mother, he always seems to give the same kind of answer. You could say that not having a mother figure means the child has become independent. But at the same time, a mother's presence can also get in the way of their adventure. And when you look at the Straw Hat crew, most of their mothers are either already dead or never mentioned at all. There are other forces, too, that try to stop their freedom to explore. The biggest one? That would be the world government. And standing at the very top of it is Imu. Looks like Oda-sensei has hidden a secret in the total bounty of the Straw Hat crew, too. Their combined bounty is 8816, which can be read in Japanese as Haha Imu. Haha means mother in Japanese. Of course, it doesn't mean that Imu is literally the Straw Hat's mom or anything like that, but it might be a symbolic play on words. Mother being the opposite of adventure. In other words, Haha Imu could represent the force that stands in the way of the Straw Hat's freedom. And when you think about it, it makes sense. The world we know today was shaped by the world government after the Void Century, and it's now being run under Imu's rule. So, Imu has become the mother who blocks Luffy and his crew from continuing their adventure. And in One Piece, the word mother is also used in another way. Vegapunk once described the sea as Mother Nature, and Aramaki called the forest a parent of nature too. That tells us something. The creators of nature, the ones tied to those elements, must be deeply connected to the four gods mentioned in Harley. So, in this video, I'm diving deep into the idea of the four gods in the third world, the world that Luffy and his crew are living in now. By the way, in the last video, I asked for questions to send to Oda-sensei for the SBS section, and I actually got over 100 comments. Thank you so much. I went through them and pinned a comment with the most liked questions. If there's one you'd personally love to ask Oda-sensei, go ahead and give it a like. I'm planning to pick a few of the top ones and actually send them in. Like this, I'll keep doing everything I can to help you all feel more directly connected to One Piece through this channel. So stay tuned and look forward to it. And I'll keep doing my part to make sure fewer people get fooled by fake info like this. Imu is clearly using powers that go beyond the scope of a regular devil fruit. First off, they seem to remember Joy Boy and Lily from 800 years ago as if it were yesterday, which means they must have lived for all those centuries. That alone suggests they've somehow gained immortality. On top of that, they can apparently transform into some kind of massive yokai and even create the same type of arrows as Yonko. But that's not all. They can also communicate telepathically, just like Zunisha and the Sea Kings. And the creepiest part? They aged Saturn in an instant and made him explode. That's some seriously terrifying power. As for where these abilities come from, the biggest hint lies in Chapter 1122. Imu was visibly shaken by Joy Boy's haki. The fact that they could sense his haki despite being on the complete opposite side of the world from Egghead suggests that they were using some kind of devil fruit ability to share vision and sensory perception with the five elders. And when the elders actually faced Joy Boy's overwhelming haki, they didn't just get overpowered, they straight up got sent back to Mariajoie. The only exception was Saturn, since he was physically present on Egghead. That means this so-called abyss ability was neutralized by haki, reinforcing the idea that its source is devil fruit power. What's even crazier is that Yonko, who already possesses the Aro Aro no Mi, can also use this abyss ability. And looking at the five elders who appeared at Egghead, it's clear that they each wield multiple powers that go beyond what a single devil fruit should allow. That strongly suggests Imu has been sharing their power with them. But are Imu's powers really coming from devil fruits? I actually think devil fruits are just one way of expressing what I'd call devil's power. And if we trace that power back to its true origin, I believe it leads us to the 4 gods mentioned in the Harley scriptures. In other words, the sun god, the earth god, the forest god, and the sea god each possessed their own supernatural abilities, and they were the ones who originally created this so-called devil's power. Just like how certain devil fruits have compatibility with each other, I think these gods had their own natural affinities as well. Among them, I believe the most opposing pairs are the sun god and the earth god, and the forest god and the sea god. To be blunt, I think the true identity of the being that gave Imu their power might actually be the earth god. If you read the Harley text, the relationship between the sun god and the earth god becomes really clear. The sun god was born from the wish of the enslaved. But right after that, the earth god got angry. It's pretty clear that the earth god, who represents darkness, didn't take kindly to the birth of the sun god, who brings light. And in the end, that earth god probably used their power to plunge the world into darkness. The name, God of the Earth, actually appeared before, during the Shandian ritual 400 years ago. But if you compare it to how it's written in the Harley text, the spelling is different. So, why did Oda-sensei change it? The earlier term, Daiichi no Kami, brings to mind the land we live on, just regular ground or terrain. But Chi no Kami still includes that idea of land. Plus, it also carries a deeper nuance, like the underground or something beneath the surface. So it's possible that Chi no Kami could be translated more accurately as God of the Underworld. Think about it. While the sun brings light and guides the world toward dawn, the earth does the opposite. It blocks out sunlight and creates a dark, underground world. Also, the word abyss usually refers to a deep, immeasurable space or void, something vast, mysterious, and unknowable. So when you think about the way Gunko and the 5 elders use the abyss, it's probably linked to Imu's powers. And if that's the case, it's not a stretch to say it's a form of darkness-based power. This might actually trace back to the darkness power Blackbeard showed once at Banaro Island. Remember, he swallowed the entire town into darkness, then released it somewhere else. So, the core structure of the abyss is probably built around this whole concept of darkness in the world of One Piece. Blackbeard once described darkness like this: the gravitational force of darkness that returns everything to nothing. In other words, Imu is a being of nothingness. Now, get this. If you flip the name Imu around and write it in kanji, you get Mui, a Buddhist term that refers to something beyond cause and effect, unchanging and absolute. Imu also sits on the empty throne, and that word, empty, literally means hollow on the inside, lacking substance. So basically, through the power of a devil tied to darkness, Imu became a being of nothingness, which would explain why they've escaped the natural law of the world, like aging and death. Blackbeard also says something really interesting about his own power. The gravitational pull of darkness drags in the true form of all ability users. I've gained a power that no one with a devil ability can defend against. This strange concept of darkness in the world of One Piece is probably closely tied to the power of darkness created by the Earth God. That connection might explain why this power has the ability to nullify other devil powers. And the one who received that devil's power directly from the Earth God is Imu. By using the gravitational pull of darkness, which draws in all devil powers, Imu was likely able to tap into abilities like Gunko's arrow powers, and even grant different abilities to the 5 elders. By the way, her left eye, by pure coincidence, looks really similar to the eye that appears when the 5 elders transform into their yokai forms. I think it's because she's linked to Imu. Her senses, or at least her field of vision, are being shared with Imu, and that's what caused her eye to take on that unnatural appearance. There's also something off in chapter 1140 that supports this. In chapter 1138, it was Shamrock who gave the order to Gunko to call one more, but then 2 of the God's Knights showed up. When Shamrock noticed something was off and asked, "Why were 2 called?" Kiringham responded, "Because you're leaving, Captain." It came from higher up. Originally, it was supposed to be Shamrock's decision to call in an extra member, but then suddenly it gets switched to an order from above. And when you think about it, that above could very well be Imu. In other words, Imu might have been watching everything that happened between Gunko and Shamrock in Elbaf through Gunko's unusual eye, and the moment Imu saw the situation unfold, they could have immediately given new orders to Somars and Kiringham. There's more. Gunko is already the user of the arrow no Mi, but she can still create an abyss, which has nothing to do with arrows. In that moment, Kiringham was seen asking someone about the location of the abyss. If all of God's Knights could use the abyss, there'd be no reason for him to ask that. Which means, at this point, the only ones who seem to have the ability to summon the abyss are Gunko and the 5 elders. That also suggests there's something special about Gunko. Maybe she has a unique connection that allows her to share senses, vision, and even devil powers with Imu. When you look at it this way, Gunko's line in chapter 1142 starts to make a lot more sense. When Somars asks her what she's afraid of, she answers, "Nika." That reaction probably comes from her sharing not just Imu's senses, but also their values and even memories. We've seen how Imu was visibly shaken when they sensed Joy Boy's haki. It wasn't just a surprise. They looked genuinely terrified. It could be that when Gunko is acting as part of the God's Knights, she's actually under some kind of mind control from Imu, which would explain why she usually comes off so cold and emotionless. So when we see her blush after seeing Somars's underwear, or genuinely enjoy fancy food like a normal girl, maybe that's actually her real self, the side of her that's just a regular girl underneath it all. So then, why is Imu afraid of Joy Boy? Even though right now it seems like there's no clear way to defeat them. It's because Imu holds the power of the god of the earth, while Joy Boy has the power of the sun god, which is the exact opposite in nature. And that's probably Imu's biggest weakness. If the sun that brings light and the darkness that covers the underground are opposing forces, then it makes sense that Imu, who controls the power of darkness, would have the sun as their one true weakness. That might be why Imu is always wearing those dark robes and never leaves Maria Joie. So basically, Imu is a hikikomori. And when they sensed Joy Boy's haki and totally freaked out, that probably wasn't just fear of power. It was because Joy Boy once wielded the strength of the sun god, Nika, who is Imu's natural enemy. That's why they tried to erase the very idea of the sun god Nika from the world. That's why they're doing everything they can to stop the arrival of the dawn of the world. Luffy's rubber body made him the natural enemy of Enel, who called himself a god. And now, as the sun god, he's become the natural enemy of the god of the current world too. By the way, when it comes to the Harley text itself, Oda-sensei purposely used vague, open-ended Japanese, which leaves a lot of room for different interpretations. That's why on my page, I break down the original Japanese wording from a native speaker's perspective. And to go along with the release of this video, I'm making that breakdown available for a limited time to all subscribers. Alright, next up, let's talk about the forest god and the sea god. The forest god sent forth devils. Now, there are a few ways to interpret this, but speaking as a native Japanese speaker, my first impression was that the forest god is the one who created the devil fruits. In modern Japanese, the verb tsukawaseru is often used when someone of higher status sends someone to a specific place, kind of like a command from above. So if we apply that meaning here, it suggests that the devils dwelling in the fruits or inside the ability users were created by the forest god and then released into the world. Actually, even before the Harley text was revealed, I talked about this exact origin story of the devils in one of my videos. There's a lot of overlap with what we're seeing now, so if you're curious, feel free to check that out. Now, Vegapunk once said that by eating a devil fruit, you gain unnatural powers, but in exchange, you're hated by the sea. But this brings up a big question. Why is it the sea that rejects you and not the forest? That's probably because it was the forest god who created the devils in the first place. Well, according to Aramaki, the forest, just like the sea, is one of nature's sources of life. In the translated version, some of the nuance felt a bit different, but in the original Japanese, it suggested that the forest is just as important as the sea when it comes to being a parent of nature. According to Vegapunk, the sea is the mother of nature, so maybe that makes the forest the father of nature. In the world of One Piece, there are actually a few characters who seem to have gained devil powers, not from the forest, but from the sea itself. One of them is Davy Jones. According to Robin, he's an old pirate who was cursed by a devil and still lives at the bottom of the sea. Normally, if you eat a devil fruit created by the forest god, you end up being hated by the sea. But in Davy Jones's case, it feels like the opposite, like he somehow received devil powers from the sea god. And because of that, he might have been cursed to wander the ocean forever, unable to leave it. Zunisha and the Sea Kings are also creatures that continue to live in the ocean in a similar way. We know Zunisha has been alive for over 1,000 years, which is more than 3 times the lifespan of a giant. He belongs to a biological classification called Naitami Norida elephant. But he's clearly more than just a giant elephant. He has the ability to communicate with specific individuals telepathically. Also, whenever Zunisha speaks in the manga, his dialogue is always shown in jagged, spiky speech bubbles. These spiky outlines are used to show that his voice is supernatural or telepathic, not just regular speech. What's interesting is that the same type of speech bubbles are used in conversations between the 5 elders and Emu, which could mean devil powers are involved there too. Actually, there are other creatures who always speak using those spiky speech bubbles. That's the Sea Kings. I think there's a good chance the Sea Kings have also been alive since 800 years ago. Here's why. One of the Sea Kings that appeared near Fishman Island referred to an event from 25 years ago, when Roger heard their voices near the island, as if it happened just recently. And when they sensed Shirahoshi's birth, they said, "This time it will work." That implies they've experienced failure before, most likely the defeat of Joy Boy. So yeah, it's pretty safe to say these Sea Kings have been around for 800 years. Now, here's something worth paying attention to. Both Zunisha and the Sea Kings have this superhuman ability to communicate telepathically with certain individuals. But despite that, it's pretty clear they don't have devil fruit powers. Why? Because they're able to move freely in the sea, so that probably means they gained devil powers from the sea itself, which is why they're bound to live in the ocean. As for the Sea Kings, they naturally live in the sea. But Zunisha, his favorite food is Sky Island's apples, so it's likely he originally lived in the sky or on land. And get this, Zunisha committed his crime 800 years ago, but he's been carrying the Mokomo dukedom on his back for the past 1,000 years. So, putting that together, it seems like he may have received this sea-based devil power around 1,000 years ago, and while it gave him the ability to speak, it also forced him to live in the sea for the rest of his life. This next part isn't directly about devil powers, but I think it still highlights the opposition between the forest god and the sea god. A lot of fishmen live their entire lives deep under the sea, and that contrast becomes especially clear when you think about Shirahoshi. She's the princess of the Ryugu kingdom, which has always lived beneath the ocean, and yet her wish is to visit the forests on the surface. So why does she long for the forest so much? Of course, on the surface, it's a personal reason. She wants to visit Otohime's grave, but I think there's more to it. Shirahoshi represents the sea god in the world of One Piece, so the fact that she wants to go to the forest, a force that opposes the sea, might actually carry symbolic meaning. Shirahoshi has inherited her mother's will. She doesn't harbor hatred toward anyone. Not even toward Hody, the man who killed her mother, or this trash, who tried to enslave her. That's why I think her desire to go to the forest might hint at something greater. A future where the forest god and the sea god, who have always been at odds, finally come face to face. They will surely meet one day. That line can mean a lot of things, but maybe one of those meanings is that Shirahoshi, the symbol of the sea god, will someday meet the forest god. When you think about it this way, the fact that one of the 5 Medica mermaid sisters is named Nika probably isn't a coincidence. Why? Because the name of the 5th mermaid is Yonko too. It's possible that whoever named these Medica mermaids was someone who believed in the Harley scripture, just like the giants from Elbaf, and wanted to assign the names of the 4 gods to each of the children. That might explain why we ended up with a weird, almost forced name like Yonkatu. So, up until now, we've looked at how the 4 gods, the sea god, the forest god, the sun god, and the earth god, each seem to have an opposing counterpart. And if we go with that idea, it looks like the ones representing each god in the story are Luffy, Shirahoshi, Emu, and Blackbeard. Here's why. In the Room of Flowers, Emu was seen tearing up photos of exactly 3 people, Luffy, Shirahoshi, and Blackbeard. That clearly shows Emu sees them as threats. Even though Emu seems nearly invincible, they still recognize the potential of these 3, and that's probably because their powers are dangerously close to the power of the gods. If we break it down, the sun god and the sea god seem to be tied to the power of the ancient weapons. Meanwhile, the earth god and forest god are connected to the power of devils. Let's start with the sun god. The sun god seems to be a source of ancient energy. The best example? Emeth, a being that's supposed to only be activated by ancient energy, was awakened by Nika's rhythm. Vegapunk even advanced research into that ancient energy, eventually developing something called the Mother Flame, but in the end, that energy got repurposed as fuel for an ancient weapon. So when you think about it, the rhythm of Nika and the Mother Flame might be very similar in nature. And that means Nika's return could trigger the return of other ancient weapons as well, which is incredibly dangerous. Next is the sea god. The one with the potential to literally sink the entire world into the ocean is Shirahoshi, through her power as Poseidon. Otohime actually described that power like this. If used with malice, it's one of the scariest powers in the world, enough to drown everything beneath the sea. In the Harley scriptures, the second world is said to be a time when the sea god went into a rage. If that second world is referring to the era that includes the Void Century, then the event where the world was submerged 200 meters underwater may have been caused by the sea god, by Poseidon's power. Some translations say it was a storm, but as a native Japanese speaker, I'd say a more accurate reading is the sea god went berserk, or rampaged. And remember, Shirahoshi once lost control when her mother was about to be shot, and the Sea Kings came rushing to her. So it's not hard to imagine that the mermaid princess 800 years ago, after losing Joy Boy and reading his apology letter, had a complete emotional breakdown, and that could have triggered the flooding of the world. Now, about the Earth God. As I explained earlier, this is likely the source of Imu's darkness-based power, the one that can even draw in the power of devils. Lastly, we have the Forest God. If you read the original text of Harley closely, it really seems like this god probably had the power to create devils, and I think this is where Blackbeard comes in. Now, I know what a lot of you are probably thinking. Wait, wouldn't Blackbeard represent the Earth God more than the Forest God? That would make sense. After all, he uses both earthquake powers and the power of darkness, so calling him the representative of the Earth God definitely fits. But we can't forget one key thing about him: how special he is. The now-dead Saturn even called Blackbeard someone with a special lineage, and Marco once said that Blackbeard's body is structurally different from a normal human's. What if Blackbeard is a descendant of someone who originally received devil power from the Forest God? If the Forest God was the one who created the devil fruits, then it would make sense that Blackbeard, someone carrying the Forest God's curse, can eat more than one devil fruit. And here's something really interesting. Vegapunk's broadcast. To those who carry the name of D among you, there is Mo. That last word, Mo, might have actually been the start of Mori no Kami, the Forest God. In other words, maybe Vegapunk was about to say, to those who carry the name of D among you is the Forest God. In that panel, Blackbeard's teeth are all fully grown in, something that hasn't always been consistent with how he's drawn. That could actually be tied to his connection to the Forest God. Think about it. Trees absorb calcium from the ground through their roots to strengthen their structure, just like calcium helps form strong bones and teeth in animals. Characters like Luffy and Brook also have this weird ability where their teeth grow back when they absorb calcium. That strange trait could be explained by the fact that they're devil fruit users, meaning their bodies are infused with devil powers originating from the Forest God. And just like that, Blackbeard's teeth might fall out like autumn leaves, but he's constantly pulling calcium from all kinds of sources and regrowing them right away. It's almost like he himself is a living forest. And in the end, Luffy will probably team up with Shirahoshi. We already know there's a future where Luffy is said to destroy Fishman Island, and when that time comes, it'll likely be Shirahoshi who guides Noah and the people of the island to safety. Plus, Luffy and his crew promised to take Shirahoshi to the forest one day. Now, on the other side of things, I think something major is going to happen between Imu and Blackbeard as well. Blackbeard's goal is literally the world itself. And if that's what he's after, he can't avoid a showdown with the one at the very top. Imu-chan. I believe we're headed toward a battle between Imu and Blackbeard. And here's the crazy part. I think one of them might consume the other. Whether it's Imu absorbing Blackbeard or Blackbeard absorbing Imu, I believe that fusion will create a monster, something like what we saw in the Harley text, a fusion of the Earth God Imu and the Forest God Blackbeard. This would set the stage for the ultimate battle, God versus God. And just like I said at the start, the biggest threats to Luffy's journey are probably Haha Imu and this man.